Hey folks, this is Andrew Bennett with InsuranceThatFits.com. And I just had a pop-up on my screen, so I'm going to shut that off. I like doing the .com thing because it reminds me of the old Yahoo.com ads. Anyway, not that you didn't figure that out. Now look, this is Andrew at Insurance That Fits, and we are going to do an introduction to Medicare tonight. I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to go right over here to my PowerPoint presentation. And we're going to start the show. As you can tell, this picture was made some time ago and I didn't have quite as much gray hair, and my skin was better, and I was lighter. But otherwise, it's still just me. Okay. So, first things first, when you are new to Medicare, you essentially have two choices. You can pick door number one or door number two. Door number one, there on the side of your screen, is traditional Medicare with parts A and B. And then part C is an advantage plan. We're going to talk about that a little later. We're going to focus on traditional Medicare right now. Now, people always wonder, why is there parts A and B? Why do that? Well, I'll tell you why. A little history lesson. 70 plus years ago, when Medicare was invented, it was modeled after Blue Cross and Blue Shield organizations. Now, those organizations were not then what they are now. In the past, they were two separate organizations. Blue Cross covered hospitals, Blue Shield covered doctors and medical bills outside of the hospital. So that's what Medicare was modeled on when Medicare was created. Now, since then, your Blue Cross Blue Shield organizations merged so that now most every state has a Blue Cross slash Blue Shield organization that is one organization. But 70 plus years ago, they were two separate organizations. It wasn't actually until 1982 that the last one got totally merged together and became Blue Cross Blue Shield instead of two separate organizations. So, anyway, just a little history for you. Now, what is this Part A and Part B thing? What does it do? Okay, so first we're going to talk about Part A. Now, I'll tell you, don't write any of this down. Don't, listen to me, but don't take notes on this part because if you get a Medicare supplement, most every Medicare supplement covers all this Part A costs. And if you go with an Advantage plan, then it just works entirely differently. Okay. So we're going to look at this. First off, for Medicare Part A, the deductible is per incident. It is not annual, which is really kind of strange. It does have a 60-day look back for the incident. So a 60-day look back for the same injury or illness. If you're hospitalized again, you don't have to pay that deductible again. The deductible this year is $1,736. Not cheap, not horrible either. And that covers between 1 all the way up to 60 days of hospitalization. Okay. If you're hospitalized for longer, 61 to 90 days, that's another 434 per day. 91 through 150 is 868 per day. Again, don't have to worry about it because most every supplement is going to cover that. And if you get an Advantage plan, it just works differently. Now, Part A also covers skilled nursing facilities. So think about somebody who's had a fall, broken their hip or something. They're in the hospital for a little while, but then they need to recuperate. Well, hospitals aren't for recuperation. They send you a skilled nursing facility for recuperation. Days 1 through 20 don't cost you anything. Days 21 through 100 have a $209.50 copay. Now, when you hear copay, that's a set dollar amount. When you hear coinsurance, that's a percentage. All right. And then finally, Part A covers some parts of hospice care. Now, Part B, your standard monthly cost is $250. Now, whether you stay with traditional Medicare or you go to Medicare Advantage, you've got to pay that 206.50, that standard Part B cost. Now, higher income people will pay more. Lower income people can pay less. And that's not within the realm of this particular video. So we'll get into that later on. But most people will pay $206.50 a month for their Part B premium. Part A, you paid while you were working. So if you think about a paycheck stub, the last time you saw a paycheck stub, there's a line item coming off for Social Security and 401k and Medicare. That Medicare is your Part A. Once you go on to Medicare, you're no longer paying Part A. Now you pay Part B, right? The deductible for Part B is annual. No, none of this per incident stuff. It's an annual deductible, and it's only $283. That is a really good deductible here in 2025. If I could get my clients who are under 65 years old, at $283 deductible, they'd love me to death. Then after that, the co-insurance is 80/20. Again, 80/20 is great. And co-insurance, again, percentage, co-pay is a dollar amount. So that co-insurance is 80/20. Medicare pays 80% of the bill, and then you or your supplement pay 20% of the bill. And what does it cover? Well, it covers a bunch of different things from, again, what it takes to pay the doctor, what it takes to diagnose you, what it takes to treat you, mental health services, ambulance services, durable medical equipment, all sorts of stuff is covered by Part B. So that's original Medicare, Part A and B. Part D is your drug plan. Now, a drug plan can be a standalone plan, like you would have with traditional Medicare, or it can be a plan that is packaged kind of into an Advantage plan. Now, every plan that's available, whether it's a standalone plan or part of an Advantage plan, it has what's called a formulary. The formulary is the list of drugs that's covered. So anytime you change your drug plan, you want to look at the list of drugs, you want to make sure that what you're on is covered. And every formulary, people always ask me, well, what if I end up on something in the middle of the year? Some new drug. Well, every formulary, from the least expensive one to the most expensive one, has to have at least two drugs in every therapeutic category. So chances are there's going to be something that your doctor can prescribe for you, but you cannot change plans mid-year. Okay. You can get exceptions, you can file appeals, and those, I believe, now go to a third party instead of the drug company. So anyway, you can do that. Now, those drugs are categorized into what are called tiers, essentially levels, expense levels. So a tier 1 is your least expensive generics. Your tier 2 is more expensive generics, maybe some cheap brand name. Tier 3 is going to be your brand name drugs and maybe the most expensive generics. Tier 4 is going to be, expensive brand names, and tier 5 is going to be specialty drugs. Now, each plan gets to assign the drugs into tiers. What that means is there's no standardization. One company could say a drug is tier 1, another company could say the same drug is tier 2. Even within the same company, let's say there's an extended release version of a drug. The extended release version might be a tier 2, and the standard release might be a tier 1. Prescription benefits are like the bane of my existence. But anyway, now there's some exceptions where some drugs are covered by other parts of Medicare, specifically infused drugs, drugs that are physician-assisted drugs, like, for example, chemotherapy. You don't go down to Walgreens and get your chemotherapy or your local pharmacy. You go into the drug office, into the doctor's office, and they, do the chemotherapy. So that's a drug plan. Typically, what you do, what I as an agent do, I go to Medicare.gov, I plug in the list of drugs, and it'll sort it by a combination of the monthly cost of the plan and the estimated out-of-pocket cost. You add those two together, and whichever one is at the top, that is the least expensive, is the winner. You're basically shopping on price, okay? Most of the time, the plan you're on will be the best plan for 5, 6, 7 years. But at some point, what you're on is going to change, or the drug company is going to make a change to the formulary, or something's going to happen. So I tell people you want to review your drug plan, say every 2, 3 years. All right. So that's your drug plan. The drug plans have a standard premium, not standardized. They can set their premiums wherever they want to, but what they can't do is charge you more for what you're on, or charge you more for being on 10 drugs instead of 3 drugs. Okay. So if plan A says, hey, the premium for Tennessee for insurance company, you know, I'm trying to think of a scenario. Insurance company Wonder Drug has Plan A. Plan A is going to be $32. It's going to be $32 for everybody, regardless of how many drugs they're taking. Okay. And they're guaranteed issue, meaning if you apply for it during annual enrollment or when you're new to Medicare, they have to take you. Okay. So you're shopping on price with drug plans. Let's see here. Okay. Now, Medigap, also called Medicare supplements. This is the standard chart for Medicare supplements. And I hate this chart because it makes no sense. You've got Part A coinsurance here, then it goes to B, then it talks about blood, then you got more Part A costs here. You got your Part A deductible way down here. I hate that. Why do they do that? I do not know. So what I've done is I've changed the chart. I think I've gotten it all right. But so I've got all the Part A cost up here together. Part A deductible, Part A coinsurance, your skilled nursing facility coinsurance. So these are all your Part A charges. These are all your Part B charges. These are things that Medicare doesn't traditionally cover that your supplement covers. Okay. Now, before we go any further, I want to talk about the C and the F supplements because essentially you can't get them anymore. If you became eligible for Medicare prior to January 1 of 2020, you can keep your C, you can keep your F. You can actually enroll in a new C or an F, but I wouldn't recommend it because essentially as people, I hate to put it this way, but as people die off, as maybe they move to Advantage plans, maybe they move to different supplements, those risk pools for the C and the F are going to get smaller and smaller. And as the risk pools get smaller, the rates are going to go up disproportionately. Now, rates are always going to go up, but you don't want that disproportionate adjective in front of your rate increase. Okay. So the C and the F for most people are off limits. If you have a C and an F, I recommend you try to get out of it. Okay. Now, looking at your deductibles, Part A, Part B, you can see almost every supplement covers that Part A deductible. All right. Now the K, the L, the M only cover a percentage of it, but still a pretty big percentage. The only supplement that doesn't cover the Part A deductible is Part A, is Supplement A. Okay. I've never sold an A. I've never sold a B. I don't think I've ever sold a D. Most of these supplements people don't buy. The best sellers are the G and the N. Okay, so that's the ones that guess what we're going to talk about. So the G you can see is it covers most everything. 100% of the deductible, 100% of the coinsurance, 100% of skilled nursing care coinsurance. Now, again, when it shows 100%, it's talking about 100% of this deductible or the Medicare Part A coinsurance. Again, covers 100% of that. I was thinking Part B for a second. Part B is down here. It is 80/20. And so when it shows 100%, it's 100% of that 20%. That's what I was going to say, but I was up there with Part A. But I was thinking in my head of Part B. Anyway, so you can see with all the supplements, your Part A coverage is very robust. And your Part B coverage is very robust as well. with most of the supplements. Actually, even these down here have very robust coverage for Part B. You got to pay your Part B deductible no matter what. Okay. Now, we want to talk about a couple of details, specifically on not on part, on supplement N. You see these two little asterisks. Okay. So we're going to talk about those two little asterisks real quick. Okay, so the two asterisks, the first one, it means that you pay up to a $20 copay when you go to the doctor. That's primary care or specialist, up to $20. I've had clients tell me they don't pay anything, if they pay 10, they pay 15. Hypothetically, it could be up to 20. Okay, it doesn't have to be 20, but it could be. That's primary care or specialist. The second asterisk is for when you go to the ER, and that's the emergency room copay of $50. If you go to the ER and you're admitted, you don't even have to pay that $50. So again, if I could get a $50 copay to go to the ER for my clients who are under, 65, not eligible for Medicare, man, they would think I was a great guy. But anyway, so that's what that is. Now we're going to take these away, and we're going to talk about this Part B excess charge, because you see the G is the only one that covers the Part B excess charge. So we got to figure out, what does that mean? Because it sounds really awful not being covered for a Part B excess charge, but you got to know what it is. And the first thing it is extremely, extremely rare. Okay. So let me explain. Approximately 97% of hospitals and doctors nationwide take Medicare. 97%. If they take Medicare, they take any Medicare supplement from any Medicare supplemental company. That's the rule. Okay. And if they take Medicare, they cannot charge an excess charge. Period. End of story. So if your doctor takes Medicare, your hospital takes Medicare, they cannot charge an excess charge. So excess charges are very, very rare. Now, of that last 3%, okay, some of those doctors will say, hey, I'll work with Medicare. I don't want to I don't want to sign up for their price sheet and that kind of thing, but I'll work with Medicare and but I'm gonna charge you an excess charge. And guess what? Medicare says, okay, you can do that. We'll pay you, but if you take a dime from us, then you can only charge your patient 15% more than our allowable rate. Okay, let me give you a scenario how this might work. Let's say you live here in East Tennessee, and you've got to have you want to have some specialty surgery, and you want to go to Chicago or New York or Dallas, Fort Worth, wherever you're going to see some fancy surgeon somewhere. It's going to be the surgeon's anesthesiologist, I'll tell you, who is one of these doctors who is in the 3% that doesn't take Medicare's price sheet. Now, this doctor, if they agree to bill Medicare and take payment from Medicare, then it doesn't matter how much they charge. They could charge 5,000, they could charge 50,000, they could charge 500,000. It just doesn't matter, because the math is going to work off the Medicare allowable rate. So if Medicare, and I'm going to make these numbers up, if Medicare says the allowable rate for the anesthesia for this surgery is $1,000, okay, how that's going to break down, Medicare is going to pay 800, 80%. The N is going to pay 200, 20%. And now that anesthesiologist can bill 15% more, which is $150. So you pay $150 in that rare, rare case. Okay. Now, again, that's just an example I just made up off the top of my head. But the key thing is Medicare Part B excess charges are extremely rare, and they're capped at 15% of the Medicare allowable rate. Now, what you get for that, you get a lower monthly premium with the N versus the G. And over time, So when you first turn 65, the rate difference isn't really that much, 10, $15 a month. Over time, the N is going to have lower percentage rate increases than the G. So where when you turn 65, that rate gap might be 10 or $15 a month. By the time you're 70, it could be $35, $40 a month. By the time you're 75, it could be $50, $65 a month. So you see over time that pricing gap is going to get bigger and bigger, and you're going to save more and more money over time with the N. Now, do you really feel that in your pocketbook? A certain amount each month over the course of 20 years, there is money savings there. Um, but do you really feel it in your budget? Um, that's your call to make. Anyway, so that's excess charges for you. Now, you notice the G has a little asterisk here. There's actually two G's. There's the regular G, and there's what I call the baby G, or it's also called the HDG. So we're going to talk about that. I think, in my opinion, this is a great supplement, but you've got to keep a couple things in mind. First off, is what is the purpose of insurance? Insurance is there to protect you from financial catastrophe or significant financial loss. Okay. That's what the HDG does. Doesn't protect you against every cent of medical cost, but it protects you from getting, raked in the hole because of medical costs. So the HDG stands for high deductible G, and I hate that name because it doesn't work like a deductible. Remember, supplements are secondary to Medicare. Medicare is in front, the supplement's back here behind it. Okay. So it doesn't work like a deductible, it works like an out-of-pocket maximum. So what would happen if you have the baby G, so to speak? You're going to pay your Part B deductible of 283. Virtually no matter what supplement you get, you're going to pay that deductible of 283. After that, your Part B coinsurance again is 80/20. Okay. So with the regular G, the G pays that 20%. With the HDG, you're going to pay the 20%. Okay. Again, keep in mind, say your bill's $1,000, 20% is $200. Doesn't put you in the poorhouse. Now, what the HDG does is it gives you an out-of-pocket maximum. Now, this number adjusts every year. This year, 2026, it is $2,957. So when you're 20% plus your Part B deductible, plus if you get hospitalized and you have a Part A deductible, when all those add up to 2,957, then the HDG kicks in, then it pays the 20%, then it pays any additional Part A deductible or Part A copays. Okay. Now, the years where the HDG is going to bite you is going to be when you have a hospitalization and you have to pay that Part A deductible. Now, the thing is, those are going to be the only years you ever hit your out-of-pocket maximum. And I tell people this is quite the sales pitch here. I tell people most years the HDG does absolutely nothing for you. Okay. And that sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Boy, I want to go out and buy one of those. But the point is, think of it like your car insurance or your homeowner's insurance. Most years, those don't do anything for you because most years your house doesn't burn down. Most years you're not in a car wreck. Um, so the purpose of the HDG is to protect you from financial catastrophe, to protect you from significant financial loss. If significant financial loss to you is $3,000, this is not the plan for you. You want to go with a different plan. Um, but it saves you. So the regular G, let's say the regular G for a male turning 65, probably between $140 to $163 here in East Tennessee. Okay. The baby G is probably around $40. So you're saving roughly $1,200 a year in monthly premium. Now, I always tell people you don't get to save everything you save, right? Because you're going to have some out of pocket costs because you're going to have to pay that 20%. But most years, that 20% is going to be a couple $100. So you've got to realize you're saving money year after year, month after month. Okay. most likely you'll never hit the HDG limit, the limit that functions like an out-of-pocket maximum. You won't ever hit it unless you get hospitalized for the most part. Okay. So those are the supplements. So we've talked about Part A, Part B, that is traditional Medicare, Part D, the drug plan, and your Medicare supplement. You want a Medicare supplement because traditional Medicare, which is Part A and Part B, it does not have an out-of-pocket maximum. 80/20 is real good on Part B, but look, if you're in a car wreck or you have a cancer, you run up $100,000 in bills, 20% is still a really big number. That's why you want a Medicare supplement. Okay. So now, drug plans, I'm not sure if I mentioned it. You don't have to have a drug plan, but if you don't get one, there's a penalty that starts to accrue. It's a little bitty penalty, but once you get a drug plan, that penalty stays with you every month for the rest of your life. So if you're on no drugs at all or just a couple little inexpensive drugs, typically what you should do is just get the least expensive plan out there, just kind of as a placekeeper so that you don't get that penalty. You can review your plan every couple of years. You can review it every year if you want. I typically recommend every couple of years. And that way you make sure that you stay with an inexpensive plan or adjust it as your needs adjust accordingly. Now, let's talk about Advantage plans for a minute. Okay. Most every plan out there has an advantage, has a monthly premium, has at least one plan with a monthly premium of zero. Okay. Zero is pretty good for a monthly cost. Very few plans have medical deductibles. Hey, that's even better. A lot of times they have better prescription benefits than standalone drug plans. Wow, this is getting good, isn't it? Now, they are driven by copays for certain services. Again, you don't ever get to save all the money you save. You're going to have copays for stuff. Most of the time, those copays are going to be very reasonable. You might have a $5 copay to go see your primary care doctor, a $10 copay to see your specialist doctor. Depends on the plan. It could be $35 and $65. It depends on the plan. Now, where these plans will bite you is there's a handful of things that default to 80/20. Again, where you are paying the 20%. That's going to be things like durable medical equipment or physician assisted drugs, infused drugs. Those typically default to 80/20. Those are going to be the times when you hit your out of pocket maximum. Now, all Advantage plans have an out of pocket maximum. The legal limit in 2026 is $9,250. Now, here in East Tennessee, we're really in one of the lowest cost parts of the country. We have plenty of plans that are between 3,500 and say 5,000, on up to 6,500 in out of pocket maximum. The nationwide average is between 6 and 6,500. So again, we've got a lot of plans under that limit. But again, you get hit with that out of pocket maximum, you may wish you had a supplement. Now, you cannot get a supplement and an Advantage plan. You got to go on one side of the aisle or the other. Advantage plans often add in dental coverage. Very few people use the dental coverage for Advantage plans because the dental networks suck and most of their dentists don't take it. I've got people with Advantage plans who have standalone dental plans in addition to the dental coverage on their Advantage plan because their dentist that they want to stick with doesn't take the Advantage plan dental. Anyway, so that's that. Now, there are disadvantages to Advantage plans. I want to make sure you're aware of this. There are some advantages, but there's some disadvantages. First of all, are networks. Staying in network is always harder than it should be. Some companies have very, very broad networks, but just the same, it's always more difficult to stay in network than it should be. You need to check the company's network before you go to a new doctor. I see people all the time online in social media, whether it's Facebook, Nextdoor, whatever. They're saying, "Hey, I need to go see this type of doctor. Does anybody have anybody they recommend?" That's not the way to find a doctor. None of those people know what insurance you have or whether they're in network or not. So anyway, networks is a disadvantage. Changing benefits every year in the fall, you'll get what's called an ANOC notice. It stands ANOC. It stands for Annual Notice of Change, and it's what's changing in your plan. Now, the reality is most years, what changes are just small things. Your physician copay changes, the x-ray copay changes, little things, your out-of-pocket maximum changes, the dental plan changes, little things from year to year. Um, after 5 years, what plan you have, you might not recognize because the changes typically are incremental. So you have networks, you're having changing benefits. You also have higher out-of-pocket maximums than you do with Advantage plans. Than you do with a Medicare supplement. If you have a G Medicare supplement, your out-of-pocket maximum is essentially your Part B deductible, that 283. Your $283 is your out-of-pocket maximum. With Advantage plans, like I said, here in East Tennessee, there's Advantage plans that have out-of-pocket maximums between, I think the lowest one I've seen is 2,000. I think there's another one at 3,500. There's quite a few that are 45, 5,500, and then another chunk that are about 6,500. So you have higher out-of-pocket maximums for those years when big stuff happens. You got to keep that in mind. Now, the biggest drawback of Advantage plans, though, is not any of those things. It's the utilization reviews. What this is your prior approvals. When your doctor says, hey, we need to do X, Y, Z, but we've got to go check to see if your insurance company will pay it first. So your insurance company has a lot of leverage in what they'll approve, for your treatment. So there are standards of care. If you have XYZ condition, there's a standard of care that says, hey, the doctor needs to do ABC. Now, there's some wiggle room in there. There might be 4 different ways to do ABC. The insurance company is going to want the doctor to do the least expensive one. It could be, I'll give you an example. I've got a client who needed a surgery. And from the sounds of it, there was what they call a laparoscopic surgery, where they make little incisions and they go in with robot arms and do this stuff. And there's lower chance of infection and faster recovery and better long-term results, but it's more expensive. So the insurance company wouldn't approve it. So they wanted to do more of an open incision. It was an orthopedic process. So now she's got, metal in her body and she's uncomfortable and in pain all the time because the insurance company wouldn't approve the better procedure. Now, it doesn't affect everybody. It's not going to affect you when you're in an emergency situation. You're in a car wreck, the ambulance picks you up, takes you to the hospital. There's no time for the insurance company to get between you and your doctor. But there's plenty of situations where it is. And I will also say not every insurance company is as bad as others. Some are much better at this kind of thing than others are when it comes to these reviews. But this is a big disadvantage. You're essentially giving up some control of your health care to the insurance company when you have an Advantage plan. So this is your broad strokes for your Medicare options. This is traditional Medicare. This is Medicare Advantage. You choose one or you choose two. You can't cross-pollinate. You can't get a Medicare Advantage plan and a Medicare supplement. You can't get a drug plan, a standalone drug plan, and a Medicare Advantage plan. Actually, there's some really rare exceptions where you can, specific types of plans, but very rarely. So you got to choose which side of the aisle you're going to be on. That's your first big decision when it comes to Medicare. Do you want traditional Medicare? It's more expensive each month because you've got a separate drug plan, you've got a separate Medicare supplement. With Advantage plans, it's less expensive each month, but you give up some control and you can have higher out-of-pocket maximums. So those are some things to think about. And that's been, you know, the review for today. I hope that um, helped introduce you to Medicare, that it helps you understand what your options are. I'll have other videos on my website where you can learn even more. But that's all for tonight. I hope you guys are doing well and hope to speak with you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.